The water hit Petty Officer First Class Kinsley Turner like a concrete wall. One moment she was standing on the deck of a cargo ship in the South China Sea, zip-tied and surrounded by armed pirates. The next, rough hands were shoving her backward over the railing, and she was falling 12 feet into dark water that swallowed her whole. The shock of impact drove the air from her lungs. The weight of her boots and the tactical vest they hadn't bothered to strip off pulled her down immediately. Cold seawater flooded her nose and mouth as she sank into the black depths, hands bound behind her back, no way to swim, no way to reach the surface. Above her, she could hear muffled laughter and shouting in Mandarin. The pirates thought they were watching her die, thought they'd eliminated the American sailor who'd been asking too many questions about their cargo, thought the ocean would dispose of the problem, and no one would ever know what happened to her. They were wrong about all of that. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know because it was buried in classified Navy personnel files under layers of security clearance, was that Kinsley Turner wasn't just a sailor. She was a Navy SEAL, one of the first women to complete BUD/S training and earn the Trident. And SEALs were trained for exactly this scenario. More importantly, they didn't know that her team was 300 meters away, watching through thermal optics, tracking her fall into the water. Didn't know that SEALs never left their own behind. And definitely didn't know that throwing a SEAL overboard wasn't ending a problem. It was creating a much bigger one. Because when you threw a SEAL into the water, you put them in their natural element. And when SEALs came back, they didn't come for rescue. They came for payback. But first, Kinsley had to survive the next 2 minutes. Her lungs were already burning, desperate for air she couldn't access. The darkness was absolute at this depth, the weight of the water pressing down from all sides. Her tactical vest, designed to carry equipment in combat, not to keep someone afloat, was dragging her deeper with every second. Most people would panic. Most people would thrash and struggle and use up their oxygen faster. Most people would drown. Kinsley wasn't most people. She forced herself to stay calm, to think through the problem systematically. Her hands were zip-tied behind her back, a problem but not insurmountable. Her boots were weighing her down. She needed them off. Her vest was pulling her under. It had to go. She sank another 5 feet before her training kicked in with absolute clarity. BUD/S had included drown-proofing exercises where they'd tied candidates' hands and feet and thrown them in pools, teaching them to stay calm, to control panic, to survive when drowning seemed inevitable. Kinsley tucked her knees to her chest and reached back with her bound hands, fingers finding her bootlaces. The zip ties cut into her wrists as she contorted her body, but she got the first boot unlaced and kicked it off, then the second. Immediately she felt less drag. Her lungs were screaming now. She had maybe 30 seconds before she'd involuntarily try to breathe water, 30 seconds to get free or die trying. She found the quick release buckles on her tactical vest. Thank God they hadn't used the ones that required 2 hands. She got the first buckle open, then the second. The vest slipped off and sank into the darkness below her. Now for the hard part, getting her hands free. The zip ties were standard heavy-duty plastic, designed to restrain. But Kinsley had trained in escape and evasion, had learned the vulnerabilities in every restraint system. She brought her arms down behind her back and stepped through them, an agonizing contortion that made her shoulder joints scream, but got her bound hands in front of her body. 20 seconds of air left, maybe less. She raised her hands above her head and brought them down sharply across her chest, using her body as the striking surface. The zip ties cut into her wrists, but the sharp downward force combined with the spreading motion broke them. Her hands were free. Kinsley kicked toward the surface. Up was where the faint light was, where the water was slightly less black. Up was where air existed. She broke the surface gasping, sucking in oxygen like a drowning person, which she technically was. She tread water, getting her bearings, looking for the cargo ship. It was moving away, already 50 meters distant and picking up speed. She could see figures on deck, but none were looking back. They assumed she was dead, sinking to the bottom of the South China Sea. Problem solved. What they didn't see was the dark shape moving through the water toward her. What they didn't hear over their engines in their celebration was the quiet approach of operators who'd been trained to move silently in every environment. A head broke the surface 10 feet from Kinsley. Lieutenant Commander Ethan Cross, her team leader, pulled off his rebreather and grinned at her. "That was quite a swim," he said quietly. "You okay?" "Pissed off," Kinsley replied, still catching her breath. "But functional. Where's the rest of the team?" "Right behind me. We've been tracking you since those assholes grabbed you in port. Watched them throw you over. Figured you'd make it. You're too stubborn to drown. But we were ready to intervene if you didn't surface in 90 seconds. Two more heads appeared. Senior Chief Petty Officer Devin Walsh and Petty Officer First Class Amy Lynn, both wearing full dive gear, both looking ready for violence. "So," Walsh said, his voice carrying the slight edge that meant he was extremely angry but keeping it controlled, "we going to let them get away with throwing one of ours overboard?" "Negative," Cross replied. "We're going to teach them what happens when you fuck with Navy SEALs. Kinsley, you up for some payback?" Kinsley's smile was cold and dangerous. "I didn't just survive drowning to let those assholes sail away." "What's the plan?" Cross pulled a waterproof pouch from his dive belt and handed it to her. "Your gear. We grabbed it from your quarters before we started tracking you. Figured you might want it back." Inside the pouch was her sidearm, a SIG Sauer P226 that had been through 4 deployments with her, extra magazines, a dive knife, and a communication headset. Kinsley checked the pistol, verified it was loaded and functional despite being waterproofed, and felt immediately better. "The ship?" she asked. "Cargo vessel registered in Panama, actually owned by a Chinese smuggling operation. Intelligence says they're running weapons to insurgents in Southeast Asia. You were investigating their cargo manifests, which is why they grabbed you." "I got too close. Found evidence they're shipping military-grade weapons disguised as agricultural equipment. And instead of just killing you, they decided to make it look like an accident at sea," Lynn added. "Threw you overboard, figured your body would never be found. Perfect crime." "Except they threw a SEAL into the ocean," Walsh said with grim satisfaction. "That's not a crime. That's suicide." Cross pulled out a tactical tablet in a waterproof case, bringing up imagery of the cargo ship. "Here's what we know. Approximately 20 crew members, at least half of them armed security. The weapons they're smuggling are in containers on deck and in the forward hold. Ship is heading for international waters where they'll rendezvous with another vessel for transfer." "Can't let those weapons reach insurgents," Kinsley said, "and we definitely can't let them think they can throw American sailors overboard without consequences." "Agreed, which is why we're going to take the ship." Cross looked at each of them. 4 operators against 20 hostiles on a moving vessel. Thoughts?" "We've had worse odds," Walsh said. "Barely," Lynn replied, "but I'm in." "Kinsley?" Cross asked. She was still treading water, still soaking wet from nearly drowning, still feeling the ache in her shoulders from contorting to break the zip ties, but her eyes were cold and focused. "They threw me overboard thinking I'd drown. Time to show them SEALs don't drown. We swim, and when we come back with payback." 12 hours earlier, Kinsley had been doing what SEALs did best when they weren't kicking doors or shooting bad guys: intelligence gathering. Boring, tedious, absolutely critical intelligence gathering. The port of Sihanoukville, Cambodia, was a maze of cargo containers, rusty ships, and criminal activity operating in the gray zone between legal commerce and outright smuggling. The Navy had received intelligence that weapons were being moved through this port to insurgent groups throughout Southeast Asia, and they'd sent Kinsley to investigate. Not as a SEAL. That would have been too obvious and too restricted by rules of engagement. Instead, she was operating under civilian cover as a maritime insurance inspector, giving her legitimate reasons to access shipping manifests and inspect cargo. It was the kind of mission that required patience, attention to detail, and the ability to appear harmless while being anything but. Kinsley excelled at it. She'd spent 3 days reviewing manifests, comparing declared cargo against actual shipments, identifying discrepancies. And she'd found something. A pattern of shipments declared as agricultural equipment that weighed far more than the equipment specifications indicated and were being shipped in climate-controlled containers, unnecessary for farming tools but essential for weapons storage. The shipments all came from the same supplier, a front company in southern China, and were all going to the same ultimate destinations, conflict zones where insurgents operated. She'd compiled her evidence, encrypted it, and sent it back to her handler. Mission accomplished. Time to exfiltrate. That's when it went wrong. She'd been approached by men who looked like dock workers but moved like trained fighters. They'd asked to see her credentials. She'd shown them her cover documentation, perfect forgeries that would stand up to any legitimate scrutiny. But they weren't interested in legitimate scrutiny. They grabbed her, zip-tied her hands, and dragged her onto a cargo ship that was preparing to leave port. She'd fought, put 2 of them on the ground with broken bones before they got her restrained, but there were too many, and they'd eventually overwhelmed her through numbers. They'd taken her to the captain, a hard-faced man in his 50s who spoke perfect English with a Beijing accent. "You are not insurance inspector," he'd said, looking through her credentials. "You are American military, intelligence operative." "I'm an insurance inspector for Lloyd's of London," Kinsley had replied calmly, "and you're committing piracy by detaining me. That's a capital crime under maritime law. We are in Cambodian waters. Maritime law is flexible here." He'd smiled without humor. "You have been investigating our cargo. You know what we are shipping. This is a problem. If something happens to me, my company will send investigators. You'll be caught. No. You will have tragic accident at sea, fall overboard during rough weather, your body will never be recovered. Unfortunate, but these things happen." He'd nodded to his men. "Throw her over. Make it look like accident." They'd dragged her to the deck, and that's when she'd spotted them. 4 figures in the water 300 meters off the port side, barely visible in the dusk light. Her team. They'd been tracking her, watching, waiting for the right moment to intervene. But they hadn't needed to intervene yet, because Kinsley was a SEAL, and SEALs didn't need rescuing. They needed backup for the revenge operation, so she'd let them throw her overboard, let them think they'd won, let them sail away thinking the problem was solved. And now, 12 hours later, she was treading water with her team, planning the payback operation that would teach these smugglers what happened when you threw SEALs into the ocean. The approach. The cargo ship was doing 18 knots, heading southeast toward international waters, fast enough that swimming after it would be impossible, but Cross had planned for that. "Zodiac is 2 clicks north," he said, checking his GPS. "We swim there, load up and intercept." The swim took 40 minutes. The Zodiac, a rigid-hull inflatable boat, was hidden in a small cove, camouflaged with netting and watching equipment. It had been pre-positioned by their support team as part of the operation plan. They loaded their gear into the boat, full kit for each operator, suppressed weapons, breaching charges, communications equipment, night vision, and enough ammunition for sustained combat. This wasn't a reconnaissance mission anymore. This was direct action. "Rules of engagement?" Lynn asked as they geared up. "They threw Kinsley overboard to kill her," Cross replied. "That's attempted murder of a U.S. service member. We're authorized to use necessary force to apprehend them and secure the weapons shipment. If they resist, and they will resist, we respond appropriately." "Translation: shoot back," Walsh said, checking his HK-416. "I can work with that." Kinsley loaded her borrowed M4 carbine, feeling the familiar weight and balance. She'd lost her primary weapon when the pirates grabbed her, but the team had brought a spare. The weapon felt good in her hands. Better than good. It felt like justice waiting to happen. "How do you want to play this?" Cross asked her. "You've got history with these assholes now. Your call on approach." Kinsley studied the tactical display showing the cargo ship's position and course. "They think I'm dead. They're not expecting retaliation. We have complete surprise. I say we board from the stern, lowest deck, minimal visibility from the bridge, take them quiet until we can't stay quiet anymore, then go loud and fast." Classic SEAL approach, Walsh approved. Stealth until violence, then maximum violence. There's 20 of them, Lynn pointed out. Even with surprise, those are tough odds. Which is why we don't fight all 20 at once, Kinsley replied. We split them up, isolate them, take them piece by piece. Make them panic, make mistakes, reduce their numbers before they can organize an effective defense. Cross grinned. You really are pissed off about the whole drowning thing, aren't you? They zip-tied my hands and threw me into the ocean expecting me to die. Yeah, I'm a little pissed. These assholes are going to learn what happens when you try to drown a SEAL. Then let's go teach them. The Zodiac's engine roared to life, and they cut through the dark water toward the cargo ship, 4 SEALs on a payback mission. The boarding. They caught up to the cargo ship 40 minutes later, using the vessel's own wake to mask the sound of their approach. The stern rose 12 feet above the waterline, with a steel ladder leading up to the main deck, intended for pilot boarding in ports, perfect for exactly what they needed. Cross brought the Zodiac alongside the ladder, matching the ship's speed. Go! 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 Walsh went up first, moving fast and quiet, weapon up and scanning for threats. Lynn followed, then Kinsley, with Cross bringing up rear security. They flowed up the ladder like water, trained movement ingrained from thousands of repetitions. The stern deck was empty, no guards visible, just shipping containers stacked 4 high, creating a maze of steel corridors. Perfect for what SEALs did best, close quarters battle in confined spaces. They stacked up at the first corner, using hand signals to coordinate. Walsh took point with his breaching shotgun. Lynn covered left with her M4. Kinsley covered right. Cross watched their 6. Walsh peeked around the corner using a small mirror, then signaled, 2 targets, 10 meters, talking, not alert. Kinsley moved up beside him. The 2 guards were smoking cigarettes, leaning against a container, rifles slung over their shoulders. They looked bored. They definitely weren't expecting anyone to board their ship in the middle of the ocean. Walsh and Kinsley moved together. Silent approach, weapons up. They covered the 10 meters in 5 seconds. Both guards died without firing a shot, suppressed rounds to center mass, professional and efficient. 2 down, Cross whispered into their comms. 18 to go. Keep moving. They advanced through the container maze, moving like ghosts, clearing corners and intersections with the precision that came from operating together for 3 years. They found 2 more guards separately, one checking tie-downs on containers, one walking patrol. Both went down to suppressed fire before they could raise an alarm. 4 down, 16 remaining, Lynn updated. But we're getting close to occupied areas. Can't stay quiet much longer? Then we don't, Kinsley said. Time to start the chaos phase. Make them panic, split them up, reduce their effectiveness through confusion. Cross pulled a small device from his vest, a sound emulator programmed with gunfire and explosion sounds. He set it to activate on a timer, then placed it at the far end of the container section. That goes off in 2 minutes, he said. They'll hear what sounds like a firefight at the bow. They'll rush forward to investigate. We hit them from behind while they're disorganized and confused. And then, Walsh asked, then we stop being quiet and start being loud. They moved into position near the main deck access hatch, stacked and ready. Through the hatch, they could hear voices, multiple people speaking Mandarin, sounding relaxed and casual. The sound emulator activated right on time. Through the deck plating, they heard the sharp crack, crack, crack of simulated gunfire, followed by a boom that sounded like an explosion. The voices inside erupted in alarm. Footsteps pounded as people ran toward the bow. The hatch flew open, and armed men poured out, rushing past the SEAL team's position without seeing them. Cross counted. 6, 7, 8. 8 armed men running forward, weapons ready but focused on the wrong threat. Now, Cross said quietly. They came through the hatch into what looked like a crew common area. Tables, chairs, a small galley. 3 men were still inside, grabbing weapons, preparing to follow their comrades toward the simulated firefight. "Federal agents! Drop your weapons!" Kinsley shouted in Mandarin, not because she expected them to surrender, but because rules of engagement required giving them the chance. They didn't drop their weapons. They tried to bring them up to fire. 4 suppressed M4s fired in perfect synchronization. All three men went down before they could get off a shot. "Clear the compartment," Cross ordered. They split into pairs, Cross and Lynn going left, Kinsley and Walsh going right. The ship's interior was a maze of corridors and compartments, all painted the same industrial gray, all looking identical. They cleared crew quarters, empty. A small armory, empty. Storage compartments, empty. The crew was all forward, responding to the fake firefight, leaving the stern section completely undefended. "Bridge access is forward, up 2 decks, Lynn said, checking the ship's layout on her tablet. "That's where command and control will be." "Then that's where we go," Cross decided. "But first we cut off their escape routes. Walsh, you and Kinsley take the engineering spaces. Make sure they can't shut down the engines or scuttle the ship. Lynn and I will move on the bridge." "Roger that," Kinsley replied. "Engineering spaces. Deny them control of ship systems." She and Walsh moved aft and down, following the corridor that led to the engine room. They could hear the massive diesel engines rumbling, could feel the vibration through the deck plating. The engine room hatch was closed but not locked. Walsh tested it carefully, then gave Kinsley a nod. She stacked beside the hatch, weapon ready. Walsh opened the hatch fast. Kinsley flowed through, sweeping left while Walsh swept right. The engine room was massive, 3 stories of machinery, catwalks, and pipes. One engineer stood at the control panel, monitoring gauges. He looked up in shock as 2 armed operators appeared. "Hands up! Now!" Kinsley ordered in Mandarin. The engineer's hand moved toward an alarm button. Kinsley's weapon tracked to his center mass. "Don't." He froze, hand inches from the button, making a calculation about whether he could reach it before she fired. "I just swam through the ocean after your friends threw me overboard," Kinsley said, her voice cold and absolutely certain. "I'm having a really bad day. Don't make it worse by testing whether I'll shoot. Hands up." The engineer raised his hands slowly. Walsh zip-tied him while Kinsley covered. Then they disabled the alarm system and locked down the engine controls so they couldn't be shut off from any other location on the ship. "Engineering secured," Walsh reported over comms. "1 detainee, engines locked in current configuration." "Copy," Cross's voice came back. "We're moving on the bridge. Stand by for contact." The sound of automatic weapons fire erupted over the comm system. Cross and Lynn had run into resistance. "Go," Walsh said, already moving toward the hatch. "They need backup." Kinsley and Walsh ran through the corridors, following the sound of gunfire. The ship's crew had finally realized they weren't dealing with a mechanical problem or an accident. They were being boarded by hostile forces. And they were fighting back. Kinsley and Walsh reached the main deck to find a firefight in progress. Cross and Lynn had taken cover behind containers, returning fire against at least 6 hostiles who had them pinned down from elevated positions. "Suppressing fire!" Walsh called, opening up with his HK-416. The sustained automatic fire forced the hostiles to duck back behind cover. Kinsley moved while Walsh fired, using the suppression to advance to a flanking position. She got an angle on 2 hostiles who were focused on Cross and Lynn's position. 2 quick bursts from her M4, both men down. "Flanking right," Lynn called, having seen Kinsley's movement. She advanced while Kinsley covered, got another angle, dropped another hostile. The remaining 3 hostiles realized they were being surrounded and tried to fall back. Bad move. They exposed themselves to Cross's position. He took all 3 down with precise single shots. 8 down, 8 to go, Cross said, moving up to join them. "They know we're here now. No more surprise. This is going to get ugly." "It was always going to get ugly," Kinsley replied, reloading. "These assholes tried to kill me. Ugly is what they deserve." They moved forward as a team, clearing each section methodically. They encountered another 4 hostiles in a prepared defensive position, but SEALs trained for exactly this kind of close-quarters battle. Breaching charges, grenades, coordinated fire from multiple angles. The position fell in 90 seconds. 4 to go, Lynn updated. 3 crew and the captain, most likely on the bridge. The bridge was 2 decks up, accessible by 2 different stairwells. Cross split them into 2 pairs again. "Walsh, you and Lynn take the port stairwell. Kinsley and I will take starboard. We hit them from both directions simultaneously. On my mark." They moved into position. Kinsley stacked at the starboard stairwell. feeling her heart rate elevated but controlled. This was what she'd trained for. This was what SEALs did. Execute in 3, 2, 1, mark. Both teams hit the stairwell simultaneously, moving fast and coordinated. Kinsley went up the stairs 3 at a time, weapon up, scanning for threats. The bridge door was closed. She stacked beside it while Cross prepared to breach. Through the door, she could hear voices, angry, scared, shouting in Mandarin. Cross placed a small breaching charge on the lock, giving her a countdown with his fingers. 3, 2, 1. The charge blew the lock. Cross kicked the door open. Kinsley went through first, weapon up, scanning for targets. 3 men on the bridge, 2 crew members with sidearms drawn but not raised, and the captain, the same man who'd ordered her thrown overboard, standing behind the ship's wheel with an AK-47. "Federal agents, drop your weapons!" Kinsley shouted. The captain's weapon started to come up. Bad decision. Kinsley and Cross fired simultaneously. The captain went down. The 2 crew members dropped their weapons immediately, hands raised high. From the port side, Walsh and Lynn came through the second bridge access, weapons up, finding no additional threats. "Bridge secured," Cross reported. 2 detainees, 1 hostile down. The ship was theirs. 20 hostile crew members reduced to 2 surrendering prisoners, 1 engineer in the engine room, and a lot of bodies. The weapons shipment was secured. The smuggling operation was broken. And Kinsley was still alive, very much not drowned. She looked at one of the surrendering crew members, one who'd been on deck when they threw her overboard. He recognized her, his eyes going wide with disbelief. "You," he stammered in English, "we threw you." "Yeah," Kinsley said coldly, "you threw me overboard. Big mistake. See, I'm a Navy SEAL. We don't drown, we swim, and when we come back, we bring our team with us. How'd that work out for you?" The crew member had no answer. Aftermath. The USS. Michael Murphy, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, arrived 6 hours later to take custody of the vessel, the detained crew members, and the weapons shipment. The ship's captain was dead, killed in the firefight when he'd chosen to shoot rather than surrender. The rest of the crew would face trial for weapons smuggling and attempted murder of a U.S. service member. Kinsley stood on the cargo ship's deck, watching the sunrise over the South China Sea as Navy personnel processed the scene. She was wrapped in a blanket, her uniform still damp from her unplanned swim, but she was alive. Cross approached with 2 cups of coffee. "Figured you could use this." "Thanks." She took the cup, savoring the warmth. "Hell of a night." "You did good. Most people wouldn't have survived what they did to you. Most sailors would have panicked and drowned. But you kept your head, used your training, and made it back. SEALs don't drown." "No, we don't, and we don't leave our people behind." He paused. "Command is asking what happened. I need an official statement. They grabbed me during the investigation, identified me as military intelligence, and decided to eliminate the problem by throwing me overboard. I survived the water, team tracked me, we intercepted the vessel, engaged hostile forces, secured the ship and cargo. Self-defense and protection of evidence. That's the official version." "What's the unofficial version?" Kinsley smiled grimly. "They threw me overboard thinking I'd drown. Didn't realize they were throwing a SEAL into the ocean, which is like throwing a shark into water and expecting it to have a bad day. We came back for payback. They got what they deserved." "Payback," Cross repeated. "I like that. Has a nice ring to it." Walsh and Lynn joined them, both looking tired but satisfied. "Weapons count is final," Lynn reported. 200 military-grade rifles, 50 machine guns, 40 RPG launchers, and enough ammunition to supply a small army. All heading for insurgent groups. We just prevented a lot of future American casualties. "And we did it by throwing Kinsley overboard first," Walsh added with a slight grin. "Unconventional approach, but it worked." "I don't recommend it as a standard tactic," Kinsley replied. "But yeah, it worked. They thought they were disposing of a problem. Instead, they created a really pissed-off SEAL who came back with her team and ruined their entire operation." "That's what they get," Cross said, "for forgetting the most important rule about SEALs. We don't quit. You can knock us down, throw us overboard, try to kill us. We'll survive, and then we'll come back. And when we come back, it's not for rescue. It's for payback. The sun continued rising, painting the ocean in shades of orange and gold. The cargo ship that had been a smuggling vessel was now evidence in a federal case. The crew that had thrown Kinsley overboard was in custody or dead. The weapons that would have killed Americans were secured. And Kinsley Turner, the SEAL they'd tried to drown, was standing on deck, alive and victorious, proving once again that throwing a SEAL into the ocean wasn't eliminating a threat. It was just making them mad. 3 weeks later, the debrief at Naval Special Warfare Command was extensive. Kinsley sat through hours of questions about her capture, her survival in the water, the rescue operation, the assault on the cargo ship. But the question everyone wanted answered was the one that came at the end from a 2-star admiral who'd flown in specifically for this debrief. "Petty Officer Turner," he said, "you were captured, disarmed, restrained, and thrown into the ocean from a moving ship. By all conventional assessments, you should have drowned. What made the difference?" Kinsley thought about it for a moment before answering. "Training, sir. Every drill we do in BUD/S, every drown-proofing exercise, every scenario where they tie our hands and throw us in pools, it's preparing us for exactly this kind of situation. When they threw me overboard, I didn't panic. I applied my training, controlled my breathing, broke my restraints, and survived. That's what SEALs do." "And the payback operation?" "They tried to kill a U.S. service member, sir. They were smuggling weapons that would be used against American forces. We had authorization to intercept and detain. When they resisted with lethal force, we responded appropriately. The mission was successful. Weapons secured, suspects detained, operation disrupted." The admiral nodded slowly. "The official report will reflect that. But off the record, how do you feel about what happened?" Kinsley met his eyes. "Off the record, sir? They threw me into the ocean expecting me to drown. They didn't realize that water's where SEALs live. We train in it. We operate in it. We're better in water than on land. Throwing a SEAL overboard isn't disposal. It's just relocation. And when we come back, which we always do, we bring our team, and we bring payback." The admiral smiled slightly. "Your team leader said the same thing. He also said you showed exceptional skill and determination, and he's recommending you for the Bronze Star with Valor. The team deserves the credit, sir. They tracked me, extracted me, and backed me up on the assault. I just survived long enough for them to do their jobs. You did more than survive, Petty Officer. You turned a potential disaster into a successful operation. You proved that SEALs can overcome situations that would kill conventional forces, and you sent a very clear message to anyone who might consider harming American service members." "What message is that, sir?" "That if you throw a SEAL overboard, they don't drown. They swim. And when they come back, they bring the entire team with them, and the team doesn't come for rescue. They come for payback." Kinsley smiled. "That's exactly right, sir. Payback." 6 months later, Kinsley was back in the South China Sea, conducting another intelligence operation. She worked undercover, gathered information, identified threats. But this time, the criminal organizations in the region had heard the story. Heard about the American operator who'd been thrown overboard and survived. Heard about the SEAL team that came back and took down an entire smuggling operation as payback. No one tried to throw her overboard again. They'd learned the lesson the hard way. SEALs don't drown. And if you try to make them, you'll discover that water is their element, the ocean is their home, and payback is their specialty. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, you can subscribe to see more incredible stories like this one.